It is Thursday at 3:30. Welcome back to another episode of Ask Alex. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How you doing, Ryan?
Good. So we're this is all for educational purposes. Obviously, you are a guru of the highest order when it comes to all of this stuff as far as investing in real estate. One of the things we've been getting questions about the past couple of weeks has been rentals and everything that's kind of under that umbrella. So, first question for you, sir. Obviously, we're in the middle of a population boom here in DFW,
Sure.
and it's still growing. Where do you see the future of rental properties going within the next, say, 2 to 5 years?
I think the assets are going to continue to appreciate. So you have this, and that's just not in DFW. That's nationally, right? So you have this supply and demand issue, right? Demand is high, supply is low. Irrelevant of your industry, if that is always the case, the supply gets more and more expensive, right? So I see assets to continue to appreciate because of the supply and demand issue.
Now, last week we talked about finance, right?
Mm-hmm.
From a rental standpoint, when it comes to finance, just from your personal experience or just things that you've learned along the way, what would you say would be one of the most helpful tips or nuggets you would give anybody when it comes to actually the financial part of getting a rental property? Because it's a big investment. You're becoming a landlord, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this last week also, right? The financing is, you've got a couple options, right? Option A is like if you're a single landlord, you can get up to a 30-year fixed rate through Freddie Mac and at a really low rate, and you have it fixed for 30 years. And so let's just say your mortgage payment is $1,000 right now, okay? And your rent is $1,500, something like that. But 10 years from now, your rent will be $3,000, but your mortgage payment will still be $1,000 because you fixed it for 30 years, right? Option two is if you're going to do multiple, you're going to go into banks, local lenders, local banks that give you a great rate, 5-year balloon, 10-year balloon. And then option C is the institutional level, which is you pull up, $3 million, $5 million worth at a time. You take it to the institutional level financing. You get a non-recourse. You get a 30-year amortization, but you'll get a 5-year, 7-year, or 10-year balloon, and probably with some sort of prepayment penalty. So.
Got you. So when it comes to being, having a rental property as an investment, essentially you as the investor are the landlord. There are pros and cons to everything. From your standpoint, what are the biggest pros of having a rental property?
So most people buy it with the assumption of cash flow, right? Okay, I'm gonna have a rental property. I've got this cash flow. That's why I'm buying it. Okay. Today, that's a myth. Okay.
Why?
That's a myth, right? That's what the gurus will pitch you, saying, "Hey, you're gonna get a cash flow and it's passive income and blah blah blah."
Mailbox money.
Yeah, BS. Okay, I don't want to say the word on whatever this is, but no, that's not true at all. Okay, and the reason why is, it's simple mathematics, right? The city we're in, DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth, right? Okay. Look how expensive the properties are, right? But your person that's renting that house, they only make a certain amount of money, right? Their incomes haven't gone up 2, 3-fold, right? Their incomes are stagnant. Just the price of the values have gone up, right? So if you're spending, and I'll just give you a hypothetical scenario, you buy a rental property for, let's say, $175,000. You put another $25,000, $30,000 in rehab, right? So now you're all in for $200,000. Your rent is still $1,400, $1,500 max, right? The guy that's renting your house, he's not going to pay you $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000. He doesn't make that kind of money, right? So where is your cash flow again? That's a myth. That's okay. But the pro is your question. Sorry, was what the pro of being a landlord or rental property is. I think truly is the appreciation these days. I truly think that we're going to keep going in asset price appreciation, and you're buying, and if you're buying a rental today, you better be banking on appreciation, and that's about it.
Got you. The biggest drawback of becoming a landlord. We just talked about the myth of people just thinking it's instant cash flow, right? But what's the biggest con or drawback, if you will, when it comes to having a rental property?
A lot of investors don't do the math properly, not knowing that when you are buying a rental property, you have expenses that you're not factoring in. Okay, so you've got people that aren't going to pay you rent. You've got maintenance calls. You've got what I call capital expenditure, CapEx expenses, right? So
What falls underneath that?
those are your big ticket items: your roofs, your HVAC, your water heater, so things like that, right? That improve your property.
The major upkeep of the home.
Yeah. So what happens? Let's say you may buy a property, and you may say, okay, look, I've already spent the money on the rehab. My air conditioning's HVAC unit is 10 years old, is working just fine, right? But then 2 years later, it breaks on you. Now you got to spend $4,000 or $5,000. Well, you weren't expecting that, right? So that just through your cash flow or your money that's coming out the door. So most landlords don't project that whatsoever. They don't project what they call a turnover cost, right? So if you're living in an apartment, I don't want to go off topic too much, but if you're living in an apartment, you've got 600-700 square feet, right? And it's a cookie cutter apartment, and you can go in there, you can turn it over quickly, change the carpets out, clean it up, and it's a minimal cost. On a house, different ballgame. You've got 1,200, 1,500, 2,000 square feet, and it's like changing almost everything else. So your cost when the tenant moves out is a lot higher than that. So a lot of landlords don't expect that. But.
Gotcha. So when it comes to monthly rent here in DFW, it's somewhere between $1,200
A little bit higher than that, but okay.
Yeah, okay, we'll say $1,500 for round numbers' sake. You pointed out earlier, right? You could be renting a place out for $1,500, but the guy who's living in there might not necessarily be making enough to where he can pay you $1,750 or $2,000 a month. So that being said, how do you go about as an investor or landlord, whatever term you like to use, how do you go about actually determining how much you're going to charge? Like you said, you buy it for $175,000, you put $25,000 in there to rehab and get it up to snuff. How do you go about determining what I'm going to charge rent?
So the key is what I determine how to charge rent is irrelevant. The market determines it, right? So for example, if I want to charge $10,000 and the market says dream on, it's not going to happen, right? So it's irrelevant what I say, right? It's what is the market, right? So again, think of it this way. The rule of thumb is a person should not spend more than 30% of their income on housing, whether it's a mortgage payment where they own a house or whether they're renting a house, right? That's the rule of thumb. Some parts of the country, people are spending 40, 50%, right? So that's not good. Right? So when you look at, hey, how much can you charge for rent? You're going to do a rent comparison analysis for your neighborhood. What's everyone else charging? And that's where you're going to be at. Irrelevant of what you paid for the property. Irrelevant. The rent is what it is, because whatever that person can afford, that family, that's what they can pay. It's simple as that. Unless they're going to get double their income, triple their income somehow, that's it.
A question from somebody in the audience. Thank you for chiming in. Can you explain a rent-to-own program? Let's say you're an investor, you have a rental property, and then you decide, I want to get into renting it and eventually letting my tenants, if you will, actually acquire the property for me. I know it's a different lane, right? But can you kind of
very different lane, very fine line.
There you go. Go ahead.
Other parts of the country, laws are different. Texas is very strict on this. If you say it's rent to own and you put it in writing with that tenant,
okay,
right? Hey, this is yours. What you're paying me as rent, I'm applying it towards the property when you're buying it, okay? Then you have to transfer that deed over, right? And if you transfer that deed over, you're no longer owner of the house. That renter is the owner of the house. So rent to own in Texas doesn't and shouldn't exist.
To your point, is it when you say transfer the deed, you have to transfer the deed over upon the agreement with the tenant, upon reaching rent to own agreement with the tenant, or upon them actually paying off the home?
No, upon when you reach the agreement with them right on day one. So that when they're paying you a rent payment, they're saying, hey, that's not my rent payment, that's my rent to own. That's going towards my house. If that's the case, then you got to transfer the deed over from day one. Which I wouldn't do it today.
Rental properties that, from an investor standpoint, that are full blown rehabs, like not just a 15, 20 grand paint, new carpet, but just like, hey, we've got foundation issues, like we're going to have to go in here and structurally really do some work. what would be your advice to anybody taking on one of those type of rental projects? Because I mean, it's easy to get the project like, oh, you walk in, it's like, hey, this place is in great shape. Let me just switch the carpet out, paint the walls, take some wallpaper down, and I'm good to go. But there's a difference when you walk in and like, okay, we've got foundation issues. Like you said, air conditioning might need to be replaced. Your advice to investors when it comes to those type of rental projects.
So we call those gut jobs, right? A rental gut job is much easier than a fix and flip gut job. Because a rental gut job, you're coming in with a mindset of, hey, this is what I'm going to do this property, whether it needs everything, whether it needs nothing, right? I have a cookie cutter program. Go in there, I'm going to put these types of floors in, this is my paint color, this is my countertop, this is the type of appliances. If my roof is over X amount of years, I'm changing it. If my HVAC is over a certain amount of years, I'm changing it. You have your policies and procedures in place. That's an easier job to do. Fix and flip gut job, much different, because you got to make it to another standard because you have to sell it to somebody. You're not making it rental grade standard. So there's the difference of the two.
We have a question from Ryan in Irving. He says, at what point should a person rent, and at what point should they consider owning a property?
Listen, I'm old school. You should always own a property, right? If you're living in a place and you're just paying rent, I'm old school. You should buy a house for yourself, because that's one thing that will always go up in value. You may have your dips here and there, but being a homeowner is a homeowner. You have some equity, you have some skin in the game, skin in the neighborhood. I mean, always be owning if you can. Because when you're owning and you're getting a loan and you're getting a mortgage, it's a 30-year mortgage. So stop worrying about, well, I'm just going to buy when the market falls, that's when I'm going to buy my next house to live in. Well, what difference does it make? If you're going to live there 30 years, right, then the value is going to continue increasing over those 30 years, and your payment is still going to be stagnant the same. Your interest rates are so low right now, you need to buy.
And so it's a good time to buy debt at the moment.
Absolutely. It's pretty much free.
To your point, everyone always says, own if possible, own. But what are the misconceptions about rentals or having a rental or paying rent that are missed, or people always try to shoot down having a rental, but there's got to be some type of pros to actually renting property, does it not?
As a tenant?
Yes.
Of course there is, right? So if you feel like, so I'll give you an example. People that live in the West Coast of Silicon Valley, right? The young professionals, the guys that make a lot of money, they live in that area and they rent. Their rental payment is so high, but they buy a house in Texas as a rental property and rent it out to someone else. So they still own a house technically, right? They're just not living in that house because it's cheaper to buy here and more advantageous to rent over there.
Gotcha. Well, been another great episode of Ask Alex. Thank you for all the questions from the audience. We'll have a special edition next week. I won't spoil the surprise for you, but we'll see you next Thursday for another episode of Ask Alex. Thank you for your time, sir.
I want to give a special shout out to Ryan Mosey, our social media coordinator, who puts this on every week and holds my feet to the fire. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you very much, Ryan, for your help. We look forward to seeing you guys next week.
All right.